now come to order. Welcome to the March 6th, 2025 meeting of the City of Raleigh Design Review Commission. My name is Will Gaskins, and I'm the chair of the commission. The Design Review Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance. When hearing requests for design alternates, the commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts an evidentiary hearing on the request. That means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. The commission's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented at the hearing. The commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The commission must base its decisions upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. This meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearings is limited. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify so long as those facts relate to legal standards. In addition, lay witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the commission needs to hear from opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. Okay, we will now call the first case on tonight's evidentiary hearing agenda, which is DA 15-2024. Casey, if you will introduce this, and I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, or nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right.
So for this case, the subject property is located at the northwest corner of Mark Street and Bragg Street. It's comprised of 1116 Mark Street and 103 and 107 Bragg Street. The property is zoned R10 in the South Park Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. The applicant is proposing to develop the site with 2 townhouse buildings containing 8 dwelling units with a shared driveway proposed off of Bragg Street. The applicant has requested 2 design alternates, a request for relief from the right-of-way dedication and street cross-section requirements in UDO sections 8.4 and 8.5 in order to maintain the existing conditions along Bragg Street, and also a request for relief from the right-of-way dedication and street cross-section requirements in UDO sections 8.4 and 8.5 to, again, maintain the existing conditions along Mark Street as well. The street regulations are intended to provide for installation of new streets and expansion of existing streets, to provide for street types reflecting the character of different areas within the city, and to provide adequate travel lanes for vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. There are 6 findings for each of the design alternates related to UDO section 8.4 and UDO section 8.5, and you'll see here that they're nearly identical. The only difference is that they're referencing different code section. That is all I have. Unless you have any questions for me, I will invite our transportation reviewer up here to share any remarks that he has or answer any questions you have.
Good afternoon. Kevin Kidd, Transportation.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I just want to know Transportation's here for any questions or concerns you have, and we'll be available for this. Thank you.
Okay, the applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and arguments must focus on the applicable standards. And if you would, just usually by our procedure here, we're at less than 9. So I just want to confirm you'd like to proceed with 7. You'll still need 5 in the affirmative.
So 5 out of 7?
Yeah.
We'll proceed.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Gaskins, members of the commission. My name is Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners, here on behalf of Archive Development LLC, who is the property owner and the applicant. Archive is seeking complete relief to the right-of-way dedication and streetscape requirements to maintain the existing rights-of-way at Bragg Street and Mark Street. The request is made in connection with a development for 2 townhome buildings, 8 total townhomes. This is proposed under the frequent transit development option. And so approval of both of these design alternate requests will maintain the type of street and the type of streetscape that is found in this historic neighborhood along the length of Mark Street and Bragg Street. But it will also allow Archive to densify these 3 properties, which is consistent with the city's guidance for frequent transit development areas and to capitalize on that existing transit access. So the development is comprised of 3 properties. It's just over a quarter acre in aggregate, and we're at the northwest quadrant of the Bragg Street and Mark Street intersection. Over here is the Stanley Martin condo development, which was formerly the Greyhound bus service lot. So that's across Blunt Street, and the neighbor-to-neighbor nonprofit, excuse me, that was incorrect, is located right there across Bragg Street. Bragg Street itself, from the west side of Blunt, goes around our corner, turns into a remnant of South Wilmington Street until it runs up and loops back to Bledsoe Avenue to the north. Mark Street is just over 900 feet long and runs between Bragg Street and Bledsoe Avenue to the north. So 2 very short streets, 2 low traffic streets that are almost primarily served only for the individuals that live in this neighborhood. Neither Mark Street nor Bragg Street have any existing sidewalks on either side of the road. And when I say Bragg Street, I'm referring to the western side of Bragg, not anything east of South Blunt Street. Properties are zoned R10 and are part of the South Park Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. This is part of a historic neighborhood on the southern edge of downtown Raleigh. These are also within a transit station area and a frequent transit area. These policies within the city's comprehensive plan call for additional density to take advantage of the frequent transit stops and the easy access to transit infrastructure. And the applicant has planned for an FTDO development at this site. Adhering to the right-of-way dedication and the streetscape requirements for both rights-of-way would significantly reduce the number of homes that Archive is able to situate on these 3 properties. Here's a look at the property from Bragg Street. Again, no sidewalks, and on this stretch of Bragg Street, there's no curb and gutter. The edge of the curb and gutter actually ends about right here at the intersection with Mark Street. And the curb and gutter doesn't resume until you get to the South Wilmington Street and Lee Street intersection a couple blocks north. And there is no sidewalk for this entire length of Bragg/Wilmington Street from the Blunt Street intersection. And here's a look at the property from Mark Street. It's similar to Bragg, although there is a continuous curb and gutter along the entirety of this 900-foot-plus street, but there are no existing sidewalks today. Mark Street is lined with old, historic, single-family homes. Here's a look at the existing conditions as they are shown on an excerpt from the site plan. Bragg Street is currently a 40-foot right-of-way. Mark Street is a 20-foot right-of-way with 27 feet of pavement, so the pavement goes a little bit into the existing property lines. And you can also see here, don't know how that happened. Don't know how that happened either. But the western edge of our property is bordered by an existing 200-foot wide railroad right-of-way. So although you see this sliver of property to our west. That property can't be developed so long as the railroad has the rights to that property as railroad right-of-way, which means the chances of sidewalk or roadway improvements being done along South Bragg as you go west and north of our property are very remote. Here's a look at the or the proposed site layout. Again, 2 townhouse buildings on either side of that internal driveway, 8 individual townhome units, rear-loaded townhome units, so those on the western side will front on Mark Street, and those on the western side of the driveway will front towards that railroad right-of-way. But you can see how cramped this site is as it's presented here. There's very little room to spare when we're considering setbacks from both Mark Street, Bragg Street, and setbacks from the railroad right-of-way. So again, this site is very cramped. Any additional right-of-way dedications or streetscape improvements are going to significantly limit what is possible on this site. Here's a look at the building elevations. So you can get a better look there. Again, if you're looking at this from Mark Street, those are the front building facades of those townhomes, and in the bottom left corner, you can see what those look like if you're looking at the site from Bragg Street. And this is a very simple rendering and a massing plan of each of those 2 townhome buildings. So diving into the design alternate standards, and I'll say at the outset, the standards for Article 8.5 are identical to the standards in Article 8.4. So for these responses, I'll just note that our responses are the same for the streetscape improvements. So the first standard, the approved design alternate, is consistent with the intent of Article 8.4. The intent of Article 8.4 is to encourage updates and installations of new streetscapes only when doing so is appropriate based on the particular development and the location. The requested relief here is associated with a small infill project, and it is consistent with the article of 8.4. The approved relief would maintain the existing street widths and the existing character of these historic streets. These segments of Bragg Street and Mark Street have very low traffic volumes, and as mentioned, they are primarily used by those living on those streets. Standard 2, the approved design alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety. As mentioned, both of these streets have very little traffic volumes today, and the proposed project involves only 8 units, which will not materially change the volume of traffic in the immediate area. Third, the approved design alternate does not increase or does not create additional maintenance responsibilities for the city. These requests seek to maintain the existing roadway infrastructure, so granting these requests would not create any additional maintenance responsibilities for the city of Raleigh. Number 4, the design alternate has been designed and certified by a professional engineer, and I'll note that this design alternate and these plans have been designed and certified by Josh Crumpler, a professional engineer with Crumpler Consulting Services, PLLC. Standard 5, the approved design alternate will not adversely impact stormwater collection and conveyance. These alternates will have no adverse impact on stormwater collection and conveyance. They only seek to maintain the existing stormwater drainage infrastructure that's located on Mark Street and at the very edge of Bragg Street. And 6, the design alternate is deemed reasonable due to one or more of the following. So for subsection A, I'll note that there is an inconsistent right-of-way width north of this property along Mark Street that is not going to allow for the orderly extension of street widening or streetscape improvements, especially given the types of uses that we have along Mark Street. It's all single-family homes today. There's also railroad right-of-way west of our property along Bragg Street, which is a significant obstacle to ever obtaining street widening or streetscape improvements west of the property. So if we are strictly adhering to these streetscape standards, not only will up to potentially 4 units, 4 townhomes be lost due to the right-of-way dedication and the streetscape improvements. But those streetscape improvements and that right-of-way dedication have no real material benefit to the public and the community at large. They lead to nowhere. And then 6B, the burden of compliance is not reasonable given the size of the site or intensity of the development. These design alternates are reasonable because, as I mentioned, the impact of dedicating right-of-way along Mark Street and Bragg Street would significantly reduce that buildable area on all 3 of these lots and reduce the number of units within this project. The costs and challenges associated with providing the street cross-sections improvement would constitute a substantial burden on this project, and these improvements would not provide any material benefit to the public. The best outcome here is to allow for dense infill development, which is consistent with the city's policies within frequent transit areas. And again, my responses for Article 8.5 will match the same as 8.4. So for purposes of not being redundant, I'll say that my responses for 8.4 stand for 8.5. We appreciate your time this afternoon. Happy to answer any questions. And like I said, appreciate the time this afternoon. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who wish to speak this evening? Seeing none. Commission questions? Can I ask transportation staff to come back?
Yes, sir.
Have we seen much of this type of request before? And if so, this is, we have not, as a body, seen many of these requests.
When you say these requests, do you refer to
Complete
like
relief from the dedication requirements.
We see them on occasion. I can't cite specific examples this board may have seen, but it's usually smaller lots like this that are constrained nearby. Railroad's an example of a constraint. You may see some of these around stream buffers, those types of scenarios, but I could research some cases while we're sitting here if you'd like, but I don't think it's totally uncommon.
Gotcha. Does staff apply any type of reasonableness test to when it may or may not be appropriate?
I think what's good to note here is that our BRT project on Wilmington will be installing multi-use paths along the frontage. They're like 15 to 30% currently, but maybe 12-foot MUPs. So there are additional pedestrian connections. I don't disagree with the limited frontage that's impacted here. I don't know if that can help any decision-making or.
And you're saying Wilmington Street, as in South Wilmington Street?
So
would
Wilmington
have-
proper, thank you for pointing that out. The larger section of Wilmington Street, where you currently have the railroad bridge going down towards Shaw and MLK, we would have MUP there, multi-use path.
Does the railroad right-of-way, which I'm familiar with in other capacity, typically impede roadway improvement?
So, you want to go ahead? Okay. There are significant discussions with railroads with any level of detail that impacts their infrastructure.
Sure.
I cannot speak to whether they would approve sidewalk or not, but I do know there would be detailed discussions that would ensue.
Do they, in general, do they typically withhold, let's say the city were going to improve all of Bragg Street on their own, would the, North Carolina Railroad typically have concerns with that, or is because it's a flat surface?
I may have to rely on counsel for some of that question.
Mr. Chair, I doubt seriously that the city would be able to require a dedication of right-of-way where that would be overlapping railroad right-of-way. So that would be a substantial impediment that would be very difficult to do.
I guess my question is, we do improvements as a city all the time in that same railroad right-of-way, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. I guess it's within the existing right-of-way, though.
Right, but that would be with the railroad's consent. So that becomes the issue is, typically if there's dedication of right-of-way, then that's a requirement of development approval. But here you've got a third party, a railroad, that's got superior rights. So that's where it becomes problematic.
Okay. Going back to the kind of the property and, are there adverse impacts to not having dedication of that additional right-of-way?
I don't see adverse impacts to city infrastructure, if that's the question.
Yeah.
And maintenance.
From a safety and transportation perspective, does giving away what is required in this case prevent, further properties? Would that create a situation that would be, problematic for the city down the line?
Understand the question. So from a pedestrian safety perspective, sidewalk always assists, but I do think something to take into account is what length of sidewalk there is, and are there upcoming projects on Bragg Street itself that are installing sidewalk? And the answer to that's no, currently.
But they would be required to if there was a high enough level of redevelopment.
I can
they would be
explore
required to
that.
put
So
in a-
if there was sidewalk to connect to or something coming, we would be pushing more for it. It's the lack of connectivity in the neighborhood is something to consider potentially. With BRT, there's different areas coming in town. Even there's some rezonings potential near Shaw, near the football field, where we're exploring additional connectivity through multi-use paths potentially. I would imagine the BRT, there'll be a stop on Wilmington Street, as I understand it, would drive additional pedestrian connectivity to existing stairs.
And that Stanley, blanking on the name, condominium project that was referenced, they're doing sidewalks on the entirety of their block perimeter?
I'd have to look. I was trying to figure out which one Worth was referring to.
Related, do we have any metrics or standards that say when traffic is low enough that it is not unsafe for pedestrians to be walking in the street?
I'm sure there's data out there. I'd have to rely on subject matter experts that aren't in the room right now. I do know we take that into account, for example, with bike lanes, like what those look like. As far as metrics on when it's safe for people to be on the street, I don't have those in front of me, unfortunately.
Other questions from the commission?
So it looks like there's 100 feet of sidewalk that would end up on, is it Mark? That street. So with the standard of remnant or disconnected, I don't remember what the wording is, does a 100-foot stretch of sidewalk mean it's isolated enough to not be part of our network?
I would, if this came in before me today, this plan, and it showed me the level of sidewalk we have or lacking in this area, likely it would be a fee in lieu. And it's based on the disconnected portion. And when we look at things like this, if this is helpful, we look at how many lots are there. To get a project, is it more likely the city would do it? Is there an assemblage of development coming in that would take it in? Those are all things we look at.
So a fee in lieu of would still be an option for them?
A fee
outside of
in
this
lieu
process?
is an option, yes, sir.
That's my question, I guess, is for the applicant. Why is fee in lieu not being pursued here?
I got one more question for Kevin.
Sure.
The multi-use path you referenced on Wilmington Street, will that materially connect to Bragg Street? Like, will there be a material connection to Bragg Street near this site?
Sure, there's currently staircases there now that get you up towards the railroad bridge. If I recall correctly, and again, I want to stress, this is fairly in the early stages of planning with the BRT, so with that out there. There is some exploration of how things could be ADA accessible, but that's not known at this time. But there are stairwell connections, yes.
Okay. Claire, you had a question?
I had a question for the applicant and whether other scenarios were explored. Like how much did that decrease the buildability of the property if you were to abide by at least one of the right-of-way dedication? So I was wondering if there was any exploration on that side. If you were to keep it on Mark Street, but not do it on Bragg Street, what does that do to the project?
Well, I think there are two different conversations about Bragg and Mark. Bragg, I think, a lot of the driving force behind the relief there is the presence of the railroad right-of-way that takes us all through here. And that said, you know, if the only sidewalk that gets built on Bragg is going to be from Mark Street to the edge of our property line, that has really no benefit to the community at large, while, again, adding costs and shrinking the buildable area that we have to work with. For Mark Street, that would significantly impact our ability to densify these 3 lots. I'm assuming that Mark Street would be recommended for somewhere along 54 feet of right-of-way width. It's not called out on the street plan, but I think that's about as narrow of a right-of-way that the city has. So if there's 20 feet today and it's calling for 54, we've got a 34-foot delta there, which means that we've got to dedicate our half of that delta. So that's 17 feet of right-of-way just immediately off of Mark Street, which I think that in and of itself, you can see what 10 feet looks like. We're right at the 10-foot setback on Mark Street as it is. So you take out 17 feet and then you apply the 10-foot setback from that new right-of-way line, and now they're better off building 2 duplexes under the current lot configurations. You know, maybe there's a recombination there, but the ability to build 8 townhomes goes completely out the window. And I did want to make a small bit of clarification. I got heard maybe Commissioner Toms mention like the remnant Bragg Street sidewalk. So just to be totally clear, Bragg Street west of South Blunt Street, no sidewalk, with sparing curb and gutter in that area. Again, the curb and gutter on Bragg essentially ends right there, and it doesn't pick up until somewhere up there to our north. On Mark Street, there is curb and gutter, but again, 0 existing sidewalk there today. And you can see, you know, the narrowness of Mark Street immediately to our north, and then, you know, sort of the jagged nature of it as you extend north towards Bledsoe Avenue. So I think for those, you know, for Bragg and for Mark, there's different considerations, but both have a significant impact on, you know, our ability to install sidewalk or dedicate right-of-way.
Thank you.
I came up with another question for Kevin. Sorry, transportation.
Well, hold on, well,
If that-
Worth, while you're up here, you know, I get this is expressly 8.4 and 8.5. Did you also consider if this would be eligible for a Board of Adjustments?
Like a setback variance?
Yeah.
Or just going the variance route because
I'm
it's a
partly
hardship?
asking the question because I don't know the answer to it for this specific, whether this would be eligible for a, but.
Well, I do think look, when we're talking about design alternates, we're talking about character and adhering to the standards kind of traditionally set by a neighborhood. And this neighborhood's been here a very long time. And throughout its history, don't think they've had sidewalks. And so from a design alternate standpoint and talking about, you know, ensuring that we are consistent with the character of the area, I think we have justified our request because of the existing characteristics of this neighborhood. So I think that's obviously why we went the design alternate route. It's, obviously, you have multiple options when you can apply for a design alternate. But seeing as how this route was available to us, this is the route we chose.
Gotcha. No, there's just, due to the railroad and other limitations on the site, this, in general, needs to be more like a variance, but that's not to say that, of course, you can come here for design alternate, but.
Yeah, sorry, I've got another question for you. I'll try to get all my questions organized, but still back to the payment in lieu. It seems like the standards for payment in lieu, this would be a direct path with no adjustments. And why are we not going that way?
I can't speak
That's
for the
less than half a
applicant.
block.
Well,
It's disconnected.
not going to say I can't speak for him if you're speaking for him. But I was not privy to any conversations that the applicant had with the city about a fee in lieu. But in my mind, if a sidewalk or right-of-way dedication is not warranted generally, I don't think a developer should then have to pay to get out of a requirement that doesn't make sense.
And just to be clear, obviously the request is for complete relief. You're not proposing any type of infrastructure as a part of this, this project wouldn't put any curb and gutter along Bragg Street, wouldn't put any amount of pedestrian infrastructure on Mark Street, outside of what the requirement would be.
My understanding is no.
Dave, did you?
Sorry. Yeah.
Kevin?
On the sidewalks, does the city look positively or negatively on a non-standard street section that would have that sidewalk right at the back of curb with no other improvements, just a 5-foot sidewalk at back of curb?
Our default is complete streets, right? We come in, you don't want people walking in the street. You want to get the necessary infrastructure in place. That's our standard look at it. When not appropriate, staff's only objectivity is to require fee and lieu from there. But I can go back and go more in the thought, if need be, on when or we do not require the sidewalk and the curb and gutter.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Anything further from the applicant?
We're good, thank you.
Okay. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. The decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members. Rather, it is based on standards and evidence. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. Okay. Would anyone like to share any thoughts on this? And Casey or Worth, if you could flip back to the findings. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts, but I would love to hear from the rest of the group.
Do you want to go? Do you have some?
Okay. I think the Bragg Street Railroad right-of-way is pretty obvious and agree with all those points. But the Mark Street, the assumption that there's no benefit to the neighborhood, that the properties to the north won't redevelop is a pretty broad sweeping assumption, and those properties to me look rich for development. Second main point is it looks like the fee in lieu language was written exactly for this specific situation. I don't know if city attorney has thoughts on that, but it basically says when construction, I'm not there yet, when construction creates a connected network or results in less than half a block of improvements, and we got there for the full length of Mark Street is 100 feet. That to me looks exactly like what that piece of code was written to enable. And I'm reluctant to say okay, fine, no sidewalk, give it all away, just because this development is going first on that block, and there's no immediate value to the neighborhood.
I have similar concern. I think on the Bragg Street is pretty self-explanatory, but I do feel having 2 bus stops on South Blount Street, and also again, just because there's no precedent of sidewalk on the street doesn't mean that there shouldn't be sidewalk down the line, and then you're setting, and while like this being a development, while it is, in the city planning to increase density, like 8 units is not mandated by the city. So there's a lot of other, which was my question about the other site plan options, maybe going for a variance or another way of increasing density doesn't require like just nixing the idea of a sidewalk on that street. That's my main concern. I think that I can see a future where Mark Street would really benefit from walkability.
Other thoughts from the group?
I mean, I agree with both their thoughts, basically not having any accommodation or potential accommodation even in the future is concerning, given that there is a lot of potential for that area to maybe have more similar development, if not.
Yeah, for me, I very much appreciate the intent by the applicant to increase housing, especially within such close proximity to our future BRT implementation. So that's also a reason for there to be pedestrian enhancements to, enable that connectivity. And yeah, absolutely, if the rest of the block were to propose similar developments, it would be a tragedy of the commons for there not to be that dedicated right away for sidewalk improvements and other things. So I'm with you, Dave. There are other routes. I think this commission in the past has been a little bit harder on complete relief, as that's more kind of hardship space versus alternate design that might be not what the code requires, but maybe speak to the intent or be better in some capacity. And we're not getting that here. I think in terms of the findings, it's number one for me. The approved design alternate is consistent with the intent. The intent is to provide for expansion of sidewalk infrastructure for all of its manifold benefits. And in addition to the BRT component, this site is also very close to our most urban and walkable part of the city. And so it's a shame for there not to be that infrastructure in place now. And this is a historic neighborhood that has not had that infrastructure for historic investment reasons. So.
And the Stanley Martin development that was mentioned, I think, has some retail component to it that would encourage some sort of like pedestrian activity from this area, I would think, so.
Anyone else have thoughts? Dave, on your question of Bragg versus, I'm blanking on the name of the street now, Mark, I'm kind of in favor of saying no to both, but I hear what you're saying on the railroad right-of-way being problematic for Bragg Street ever being truly implementable, but it's not just sidewalk. There's other benefits to having that right-of-way dedication. Thoughts on that?
What's the length? I'm gonna check the length of Bragg Street. I'm probably going to agree that it include both of those.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to make certain, I believe the design alternate, each design alternate is both Bragg and Mark Street. So I question whether or not there can even be a bifurcation there.
That's a helpful clarification. All right.
That's, looks like less than 100 feet of sidewalk that they provide there too. So, yeah, and both of them, it's less than half a block of improvement that you would get, which puts them in that required fee in lieu by my understanding of the code.
All right, any other thoughts from the commission? I'm gonna reopen it for a second. Worth, if you'd come back up. Before we vote on this, anything further, or would you like us to move forward to a vote?
Could we table this case to next month?
I'm open to that. I just would ask the question of what materially might change about the request.
I'd have to ask the applicant about the possibility of a fee in lieu for sidewalk. I'd have to refer back to Mr. Kidd just on how what we pay for fee in lieu for sidewalk, what we pay fee in lieu for the right-of-way itself. Just trying to get a better understanding of that before this commission makes the final decision. Maybe that is some partial compromise there with regard to fee in lieu on sidewalk and/or right-of-way. But I'd like to have that conversation with the applicant before the commission takes action, if that would be helpful to the commission.
I don't want to protract this unnecessarily, but I guess, Commission, you guys have any thoughts on that? Is that reasonable, or are we going to be back at the same result here of? I guess the question is, why keep it open?
If they can come up with an alternative that, I don't know what their alternative might be, but if there's a different proposal, I'm happy to look at it.
I mean, that would materially change your request, right? You're requesting complete relief.
I would ask the commission if there was a choice between right-of-way or sidewalk along either Mark and/or Bragg Street, is there a better outcome? You know, if we were able to incorporate a sidewalk easement along our property's frontage and construct sidewalk along our length of Mark Street, that could be a potential condition of approval if that gets at the intent of Article 8.4 and Article 8.5. I don't know if it's feasible. I'd have to go back and speak with Mr. Crumpler and the applicant about the possibility of doing so, but I don't want to not try to find a compromise or a solution before, you know, if this commission were to just deny it today.
I mean, I can say I'd look at it more favorably if there was some accommodation being made for pedestrians, but would also expect that to be worked out with transportation and that whatever section comes forward, because I think that's then what you'd be asking for is a new.
Yeah, I can't see how your
Cross-section.
your plan doesn't materially change with some amount of sidewalk.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
The plan does not change if we dedicate right-of-way and add sidewalk. That's pretty much the whole point.
And Mr. Chair, let me clarify. I did look at the notice again, and I was in error. So they did bifurcate the request. So it is a design alternate from section 8.4 and 8.5 for Bragg Street, and then a separate one for 8.4 and 8.5 for Mark Street. So I do want to clarify that. So if there is interest in Bragg but not Mark, there is the opportunity to approve that one design alternate without consideration for Mark Street.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd say the sidewalk, you know, if that's important to the commission, there is potentially the possibility of again, a sidewalk easement on private property to create the beginning of some sort of sidewalk along Mark Street. But again, I think the possibility of a NCOD being wholesale redeveloped for not single-family houses is somewhat low.
Sure.
I don't see it often,
Yeah.
which in turn leads to no requirements for right-of-way dedication and sidewalk improvements if you're going with a Tier 1 site plan.
All right. I guess I'm open to continuing it.
Yeah.
If they go back to the table and they can't make it work, they can't make it work, and it just never comes back to us. So I'm open to it. I do think this corner is materially important from a pedestrian connectivity perspective, so if they were able to incorporate some amount of sidewalk capacity, I don't know how that wouldn't kick them back a bit, but I'll let them design it, so.
No, we agree, yeah.
They might have to lose one unit, but that's,
What's that?
they might have to lose one unit, but I think that's the thing to clarify, is we're here to uphold for the right-of-way for the public to use, and then the amount of units they can put on there is not really of our concern.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't know that it's necessarily now, transportation staff might have a different answer to this, but I don't know that's necessarily the total amount of right-of-way, but yeah, absolutely, the sidewalk and pedestrian and other, public amenities that would go within that right-of-way space are part of what would be that complete relief, so.
Well, again, we can take a look at it between our design professionals and the property owner, see what conditions we might be able to offer, and if we have something that we believe the commission would appreciate, we'll be back.
Okay, yeah, and just to be fair, I don't want to lead us on a wild goose chase either. The answer could still be no if you come back with another.
Like you said, there's other
alternate.
avenues for relief.
I just want to confirm with, Kevin or Casey, if you can give the thumbs up that seems reasonable as well that would work. Okay. Seeing the affirmative there, so. All right, we need to continue this to a date certain, I think, is the challenge, so. I'm looking, Brad, at you.
Yeah. We can continue to the next meeting, but I don't know what he needs. And they can certainly request to go to a different meeting if they need more time than that.
Okay.
But typically it would be the next meeting.
Given the timeline that planning has for updated materials, I would be open to deferring this case to the May meeting.
That would be May 1st, yeah. Okay. Just confirming May 1st is the date that
May
you're
1st.
requesting.
May 1st would be our preferred. I think that would give us time to have those internal conversations, talk with Mr. Kidd, and then bring an updated presentation or application back to you.
Okay, so rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now go to the next case on the agenda, which is, let me pull it back up. DA 4, 2024, Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church. Casey, if you will introduce this hearing.
So this subject property is located at the northeast corner of Lead Mine Road and French Drive, and the property addresses are 5000 and 5008 Lead Mine Road. The property is zoned R4. The property is currently improved with an existing place of worship, and the applicant is proposing to expand and construct additional buildings on the property as well as some surface parking. The applicant has requested 2 design alternates, a request to reduce the minimum driveway spacing requirement between 2 proposed driveways on French Drive, and a request to reduce the minimum driveway spacing between a proposed driveway on French Drive and the intersection of French Drive and Lead Mine Road. The blocks, lots, and access requirements pertaining to driveway spacing are intended to provide a well-connected street network, safe and efficient and convenient access within and between developments, and to lessen traffic congestion. There are 4 findings have to be met to grant the design alternates to the driveway spacing, and then there are 6 to grant the design alternate to the Raleigh Street Design Manual, which is the driveway to intersection spacing requirement. So I'll again invite Kevin Kidd from Transportation up if he has any comments for you, and then we'll hand it over to the applicant.
Hello again, Commission. I'm here to answer any questions as they arise. Also want to note appreciation to the team that's coming before you. We've been collaborating for the past 9 or 10 months or so. A lot of discussions, so a lot of detail to discuss, but I'm happy to come up with any questions you have.
Okay, if the applicant would now come forward. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. And if you would, are you going to introduce your witnesses first?
Yes, sir. So Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. I'll have Rick and Jeff introduce themselves.
And right before that, I think, Sravia, you need to run, correct? So we'll be at 6 now, still need 5.
Okay.
Just want to confirm that you would like to proceed. Yes? Okay. All right, now, please proceed.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rick Baker with the Timmons Group, 5410 Trinity Road in Raleigh, civil engineer.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jeff Hooknuddle with the Timmons Group, 5410 Trinity Road. I'm a traffic engineer for the project.
Great, and I'll swear you both in at the same time. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, seeing the affirmative for both.
So this is the long-awaited design alternate request for the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church at 5000 and 5008 Lead Mine Road. The church is requesting 2 design alternates. One is 13 feet of relief to the driveway spacing requirements, which requires driveways to be spaced at least 200 feet apart. We would be constructing a new driveway in the same location as the existing, that is 187 feet from another driveway that serves the church. And also relating to this new driveway in the same location as the existing, we're also seeking relief to the intersection spacing requirements, which would otherwise require us to space this driveway at least 150 feet from the intersection in order to locate it 56 feet from said intersection. And all of these 2 requests are made in connection with the planned expansion that the church has for its current facilities. And those include a new family life center, a new sanctuary, and a new chapel. So just a little bit of background on the church. Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church has a long history in Raleigh, over 100 years of services in Raleigh. Their first service was held downtown in 1924, and they have been in this current location and in this current space since the mid-70s. And their current membership is over 400 families today. Here's a look at the site, 5000 and 5008 Lead Mine Road. We are in the northeast quadrant of the French Drive and Lead Mine Road intersection. The existing church facilities are all on 5000 Lead Mine Road, which is the southern parcel immediately abutting French. The church purchased the 5008 Lead Mine Road parcel in 2019. There's the single-family home that exists today. That will be demolished, and most of the expansion that the church is planning is going to be on that northern parcel. This is a look at the church from the Lead Mine Road and French Drive intersection. That retaining wall was built by the city around 2000. You can see the existing driveway curb cut on French that we intend to replace with a new curb cut in the same location as the one circled in red. I'll also note the church I'm messing up these drawings today. Okay. Right there is a driveway leading into the church parking lot from Lead Mine Road. Now, Lead Mine Road is a very heavily trafficked area. One of the big items that we're going to demonstrate in this presentation is the improved safety by taking that driveway out of the question and having all of our access off of French Drive, which is a much, much, much less trafficked street and a much safer street for churchgoers to use. This is a look at the church from French Drive, and this here on just right of the right-of-way is an existing drop-off area for parishioners, and there is a vegetated median between that drop-off area and the French Drive travel lanes. This is a look at Knaresboro Road. We do not plan for any access on Knaresboro. There is none today, but we just wanted to highlight it. There's existing sidewalk that ends at our property line. We're going to be extending that sidewalk as part of this development. So here's a look at the existing conditions. Again, an excerpt from our ASR. The eastern parking lot, shown here, is again 56 feet from that intersection, and it connects to that existing driveway on Lead Mine Road. And so that is one of the main parking lots on the existing site. There are additional parking spaces on the eastern side of the site as well, but they do not connect today. And just for reference, this drop-off area is considered a driveway by the city. So just for everybody keeping score, there are currently 4 City of Raleigh driveways that serve the existing church. And now I'll have Rick Baker come up and walk through the planned ASR and the improvements to vehicular circulation.
Thank you, Worth. Again, I'm Rick Baker with the Timmons Group. So this is our site plan. It actually has grading on it as well, so really our grading plan, but want to walk through the proposed improvements to the project. So I'll just highlight a few areas. Again, Lead Mine Road is to plan left. French Drive is the bottom of the plan. The existing sanctuary today is in this location. The proposed sanctuary is here, and the proposed Family Life Center is in this location. So Worth, you mentioned there are four driveways today. The proposed plan only has 3 driveways, so we're eliminating the driveway on Lead Mine Road again. You've just heard that. The driveway on Lead Mine Road today is in this location, so that driveway will be removed. So the 3 remaining driveways are on French Drive, and just to reiterate, they are in the same location as the driveways are today. So they will be improved with curb and gutter and widened a little bit, but that's driveway number 1. The drop-off is considered one driveway, that's driveway 2. And then the driveway further to the east is here, and that's driveway number 3. So that is our proposed plan.
Just to make sure it is explicitly clear, the intersection spacing deals with this driveway here. The driveway spacing deals with the distance between this driveway and the middle of that drop-off area, which again is considered a driveway under the city's ordinance. And you can better see that here. Again, 56 feet to the intersection, 187 feet from the middle of that drop-off area. We are compliant. between the drop-off area and the easternmost driveway on the site. And again, one thing I did want to highlight, as I mentioned, there is no real circulation between the two parking lots today as it exists. There's 4 bays of parking on the west and another about 4 bays of parking on the east, but you cannot access one or the other from inside of the site. One of the nice things about this development is there is now circulation running all through the site. So parishioners that park in this parking lot will have the option whether to exit or enter via the eastern driveway or the western driveway, just depending on their preference. And now I'll have Jeff come up and run through the traffic analysis that he did for this project.
Good afternoon, again, Jeff O'Connell from Timmons Group. We did a traffic analysis of the intersection of Lead Mine Road and French Drive based on the additional square footage that's to be added. We also looked at the future, a 2027 build at Lead Mine and French Drive to look at the level service, delay values, and things like that. The additional square footage is going to generate approximately 11 trips, 7 in and 4 out during the AM peak hour, and 18 total trips in the PM peak hour, 8 in and 10 out. We looked at the delay increase caused by these trips, and it's, first off, these trips represent less than 1% of the total volume of the Lead Mine, French Drive, Town and Country Road intersection. They also, for the westbound approach coming from French Drive onto Lead Mine, represent less than 3 seconds per vehicle of delay increase in delay. So it's a very minimal increase in delay based on the new updated build for the AM and PM peak hour.
Thank you, Jeff. And now I'd like to go over the standards of approval for Article 8.3, which is that driveway spacing request. So first, the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of sections 8.32, 8.34, and 8.35. The intent of the UDO's site access regulations is to provide a means of safe, efficient, and convenient vehicular and pedestrian access within developments and between adjacent developments and lessen traffic congestion. The existing complex includes 4 bays of parking between Lead Mine Road and the building, with 4 total driveways that lead out to both Lead Mine Road and French Drive. This site plan replaces the existing 4 bays of parking with 2 bays of parking between Lead Mine Road and the building. It removes the driveway to Lead Mine Road, which is an avenue 4-lane divided street on the city's street plan, which is a major thoroughfare. All of the church's access will now be along French Drive, which is designated as a neighborhood street and is much less trafficked than Lead Mine Road. The redesigned driveway closest to the intersection is in the same location as the existing driveway, and it provides 187 feet of separation from the drop-off area. So we're very close to being able to meet that 200-foot driveway spacing difference. So we think that our amount of requested relief is pretty reasonable. And for those reasons, the design alternate is consistent with the intent of those sections. Number 2, the approved design alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety. This proposed design alternate would remove that existing access to Lead Mine Road, which should improve traffic safety along this busy street. And the proposed design alternate creates new parking areas that wrap around the proposed development to allow vehicles internal circulation and be able to enter or exit at either French Drive curb cut. The driveways along French are spaced apart as much as possible, as is practical, from the drop-off area in front of the church's main entrance. And thus, the proposed design alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety. Number 3, this design alternate does not conflict with any approved or built roadway construction projects that the City of Raleigh has planned. And number 4, the design alternate is deemed reasonable due to one or more of the following. And for our slide, I just put up subsection A, given the existing physical environment, compliance is not feasible. The proposed design alternate is reasonable given the existing physical environment. The new French driveway must find a balance between the separation from the drop-off area and the Lead Mine Road intersection. This driveway is not physically able to be located far enough from both the intersection and that drop-off area. And the applicant has provided or proposed a compromise and is requesting some measure of relief from both. The proposed alignment of this new driveway provides adequate and safe spacing from both the intersection and the drop-off area. And now just to run through the Raleigh Street Design Manual Standards of Approval, which concern the intersection spacing request. So number 1, the guidelines contained in the Raleigh Street Design Manual are intended to provide adequate and coordinated development with necessary facilities to serve and protect all users of Raleigh's transportation system. The proposed driveways along French Drive is 56 feet from the intersection, 94 feet less than the required 150. The proposed driveway is identically located to that existing driveway that serves the church today. As you heard from our traffic analysis, the amount of wait time at French turning to Lead Mine is 3 seconds. So even though we have less than the required driveway spacing to that intersection, we don't envision there being a queuing problem coming out of the church and making exits onto Lead Mine Road. Again, the busiest time that this church will, or the most traffic that this church is going to have is going to be on Sunday mornings, when your roads are primarily lessened from your typical weekday rush hour traffic. And so, again, just given the type of use, given the location of the existing driveway and the lack of problems that it has caused for the church in the past, we contend that, again, this alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety, and it is consistent with the intent of the design manual. It does not create additional maintenance responsibilities for the city. The design alternate's been designed by Rick Baker, professional engineer. This design alternate does not adversely impact stormwater collection or conveyance. And again, as I mentioned, for the driveway spacing, this request is reasonable given that existing physical environment. We just can't meet both requests. And so you try to find that compromise where you're providing safe enough distance from the drop-off area while also providing enough space for people to get out of the site and safely get onto Lead Mine Road. We appreciate your time. Happy to answer any questions that you have this afternoon.
Are there any members of the public who are here to speak?
I will note there are members of the church here that are here in support of this case.
Okay. Commission, any questions for the applicant or transportation staff?
Yeah, I have one question. Can someone walk me through how the drop-off is used? Like what direction people approach it from, where they come from in the neighborhood? It seems like you would be using it in the opposite direction of how you would come off Lead Mine on French, right? I just want to understand that.
Yeah, so the drop-off area, the typical configuration or direction is traffic coming in this direction. And people coming in from Lead Mine Road are making a U-turn here.
So they're making that very tight turn into there if they come from Lead Mine?
That's correct.
Okay. And has there been any conversation about preventing the immediate left turn into the western lot at certain hours, or because that seems like the potential queuing problem, correct? Is if there's a long line of cars trying to get out of French Drive onto Lead Mine and you can't turn across it to get into the eastern lot. Just wondering if there are any thoughts about that conflict.
Mm-hmm. So one other thing to note, so if you see this driveway here and here, The church owns this property and has a parking lot over there as well. So a lot of the parishioners park in that location and then walk across French Drive right here.
That was one of my questions, is where are the people parking? Because
Right, yes.
there's not enough.
So they, they intend to maintain that parking lot. They're growing church, and so adding the additional parking spaces on site to accommodate their growth.
One thing I'll note, Commissioner Griffith, is if you remember how many times I came up and deferred this case over the last year, we've had lots of conversations with Mr. Kidd and the others at the Transportation Department. I don't want to speak for Kevin, but that hasn't come up in our, or at least it hasn't been identified as a significant concern from transportation. It has been communicated to us, so.
Yeah, the only reason I was asking is you could imagine a scenario where people coming off Lead Mine who want to get into that western lot can't get in because of cars exiting French, and they start to queue up onto Lead Mine. And so I just was wondering if anybody had thoughts as to whether or not that's likely or a problem or.
One of the thoughts here, that driveway is an existing driveway and been there a long, long time. So there has not been an issue, excuse me, with that in the past. So we felt by keeping it in the same position that there'd be, very small chance of an issue in the future.
Just to confirm a couple of things, our plans in the packet don't include a sidewalk. I just want to confirm the sidewalk is part of the what we're ruling on this evening.
Correct.
Yeah, the sidewalk along French Drive.
That's correct. Oops, trying to.
That's right. And then, what's the current configuration of that intersection at French and Lead Mine? Is that just a two-way stop?
Two-way stop, that's correct.
Yeah. Is there any conversation around signalizing that intersection, or is that not in
No conversations. Right now, as it sits, it won't meet warrants. So the volume on French Drive is just too light. The volume on Lead Mine is heavy enough to warrant if the side street volume did. Town and Country does have a heavy right turn, but often when you look at the warrants, the right turn volumes are excluded from the calculations. You typically look at lefts versus throughs. So.
And then you spoke of previous challenges with that entrance on Lead Mine. Could you speak a little bit more to what those challenges, like why is, in your own words, why is the location, then one entrance being on French versus off of Lead Mine superior for the congregation?
Is the question the benefits of removing the access to?
Right. Why do you prefer this over the Lead Mine?
Well, it serves two purposes, and one of which is not transportation related, but it's area that we can use as tree conservation area to meet our requirements there. Okay. But in general,
I get that vehicular speeds are higher on Lead Mine, which is challenging, but
right, I'll let our traffic
whole
engineer handle
movement
that.
Yeah. So what you've done is there are no turn lanes on Lead Mine into this driveway. So what you're doing is you're eliminating stopping and slowing vehicles from Lead Mine. You've got folks that are probably coming a little too fast down Lead Mine. And so you've removed that risk, that rear end collision risk. And also we talked about, on-site, having the on-site flow. So now they've got an option that they can go down to the easternmost driveway and circle around. So you've got a different location for that driveway. It helps out with the flow on-site as well. So.
Okay. Questions from the commission? Kevin?
Yes.
From your perspective as, the transportation review staff here, are there any designs that should be considered here that aren't currently proposed that are reasonable and would increase, safety in this configuration?
Well, what we can do, the big part of what's before you here today is the overall layout. When we get into the site permit review aspects, we have the ability to look at the operations of that driveway and speak with the church and developer and the engineer if we want to limit that access in any way. As
So you're
pointed
saying
out.
that's still an option even if approved
It
today?
is.
Okay.
It is, and we can, it's in the administrative site review process now, and we can work with Rick and his team. As pointed out earlier, the one movement we would want to keep an eye on is the left turn into the driveway. But we could also work with staff, or excuse me, with the developer on those items as well, and look at the circulation patterns.
Are there any other alternative designs that transportation staff proposed here that would be superior configurations from a safety perspective?
I concur with Jeff on what he said with this signal. I'm not sure that's something NCDOT would be interested in at this moment. Operations of these driveways is something we can handle internally. The right turnout, not as big a concern.
Okay.
But we can certainly work with them if it's some level of controls of access into the driveway, if it's some kind of agreement on hourly. The current configuration of the site lends little room to move that driveway.
Right.
Yeah, in your, I guess there's the possibility that you could keep the lead mine access dead end, the west parking lot off of the drive that's internal to the site, and only have the eastern French access and then the lead mine access. And in your mind, would that lead mine access be more or less dangerous than the second French access that's so close to lead mine? I mean, if we're asking about other options, that seems
Right.
like a reasonable one, to keep the lead mine access, not the French access that's so close to lead mine,
When the opportunity presents.
which still allows you to drive through the site, right?
It would. The thing I would keep in mind as well, we have less control over that. NCDOT would be making a call ultimately on the location. Obviously, they have to comply with both code sections, which is why they're here before you today. Staff, transportation professionals as a whole, strive to have access off the lesser street, right? Generally,
Even with the degree to which it is very close to the intersection? That is the trade-off that you think is it is safer to be close to the intersection but be off of the faster-moving street?
I think looking at this access and taking a look at the controls, maybe the left turns in, I do think so.
Okay.
You've got a long straight run of road right here. I don't think we've got to 20,000 cars a day, but I don't think we're that far off. If I recall correctly, it's 45 through here. I also want to say we've got some medium breaks, but I would prefer access off a lesser street. I do understand the question, and I think the left turn is something we can, however you want us to look at it, we can.
Okay. Is there anything else that's part of, conversations in the design here with regards to, safety features or other elements that should be considered?
One of the big steps that happened here over our talks is improving French Drive to the level allowed by the code, partly as they've made some measures to add additional protections from the parking lot they mentioned earlier for pedestrians. We can get more in the weeds, but there is some level of higher marked pedestrian crossing and what have you. Staff and the developer have worked pretty hard along the Creedmoor frontage to go from no relief to getting full right-of-way and slope easement. So there's been a lot of pluses here in the design moving forward from where we started. Outside of that, there would be some elements outside of the control of this commission that we would still work through, some levels of encroachments and those kind of things, but we can handle that administratively and through council action.
Was an entrance to the plan view occur Narsborough Road, Naresborough, was that ever considered as or was that always stormwater facility?
I might have to defer to Rick, but I think it was always a stormwater facility.
Rick?
Yes, that's correct. In my experience in development, the neighbors generally prefer not to have access of a development like this pouring to the neighborhood streets. And I know
No
that's
doubt.
a
You've shown,
preference.
though, that it doesn't increase vehicle travel much, though.
Right, it doesn't, but These neighbors are very interested in this area, I'll say. So that, and that's a low point of the site, so we proposed the stormwater pond there. It was a logical, with the dimensions of the property, that was a logical location to put the pond.
Okay, anything further from the commission? All right, well now, anything further from the applicant? Okay, we will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based on the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on personal preference of commission members, rather it is based on standards and evidence. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. If someone would flip to the findings, specifically for the intersection spacing. And I'll go first here. I've got no issue whatsoever with the driveway to driveway spacing. It's a pretty small request. It's almost entirely the driveway to intersection spacing that is the question for me. But Kyle, you look like you're.
I was going to agree largely with you. They're not proposing anything that deviates from the current condition on site. While there is going to be additional parking there, kind of understanding how churches function on Sundays when they have their largest traffic, I don't think there's going to be a huge queue before and after services based on what we were presented today.
Yeah, I mean, I think operationally it's something you can manage of like you could just shut that entire entrance at peak congregation time, but
Could it potentially be a big enough issue? I know I've seen some congregations employ city police
That's right.
officers to have additional safety controls.
and I don't know that we need to say that,
No, no.
especially given transportation staff's comments were very helpful of, yeah, yes, they feel like this is safer than a lead mine configuration, so. It's pretty close to that intersection, but Matt, anything?
I mean, I think with transportation confirming that the access on French, close to lead mine is safer than going directly on a lead mine, I'm satisfied. I don't know if we can add a condition that the applicant work with transportation to evaluate the immediate left turn into that portion of the lot when coming off lead mine as a condition.
I'm
That
gonna
may or may
imagine
not be
that-
possible, but
that needs-
that's the only thing I would mention.
I agree with that intent. I think from a condition, it would need to be much more objective and explicit.
I would agree with that, because that would be fairly ambiguous as to what that means, is to evaluate, yeah.
What are they reviewing it against? Yeah, so. Do you have anything, Dave?
I just recognize there's been 9 months
Yeah,
or
that's
so
right.
of divine collaboration between transportation and the church and the consultants, so it
Do you think
sounds
that
like
we can design it better here?
I don't know.
30 minutes? Yeah.
It's acceptable for me. They definitely haven't made it worse, like a lot of these developments do.
Yeah, I mean, the whole existing curb cuts and keeping existing driveways doesn't totally hold with me from you're getting rid of the primary entrance, so the whole configuration is going to change, but given transportation's comments on safety, I feel this is reasonable. And that, there have been further enhancements that have been made to, improve the site and the street and other things. So with that said, I'm comfortable moving forward. Would someone like to make a motion or further comment?
I'll motion to approve as presented.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Toms. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, that's 6. Commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right to such notice following the decision. Thank you, guys. Okay. Now brings us to the third case on the agenda this evening, which is DA 12, 2024. And Keegan, it looks like you're presenting this when ready.
All right, thanks.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. This design alternate DA 12 2024 is for a proposed Whataburger restaurant at 6305 Falls of Neuse Road. So it's close to the Spring Forest Road intersection, but actually this out parcel only has frontage along Falls of Neuse. They are proposing to demolish the existing restaurant that's on the site and construct a new Whataburger restaurant, be approximately 2,800 square feet in size, will include a drive-through lane and additional off-street parking. Should note that the property is zoned CX3PL, that's the parking limited frontage, and so that particular frontage is imposing build-to requirements, and that is part of what is being requested for relief. They are seeking to reduce that build-to along Falls of Neuse Road, and part of their design alternate includes a proposed wall and also evergreen plantings in place of the building facade that would otherwise be located in the build-to range. Build-to range for the parking limited frontage is set as the minimum setback to 100 feet from the street right-of-way, and they're required to put 50% of the, to put building facade, within 50% of the lot frontage within that build-to range. Here are the findings for build-to that they will have to satisfy in order for the design alternate to be granted. And the second part of the request relates to transparency. And so this actually has two components. They're seeking to reduce transparency in the 0 to 12-foot zone, so sort of that first level or first story, and then also in the 3 to 8-foot zone. And I included a image that's also in your packet that shows where they're providing some transparency, which is in that lighter blue color, and then they're also proposing spandrel glass as well, but spandrel glass doesn't meet our full transparency requirements, so that's part of their alternate request as well. Transparency requirements for this particular building type are 33% along the ground story. Here are the findings that will need to be satisfied for the transparency requests. And that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions you all may have.
Thank you. If the applicant will now come forward.
Got Lee Bakley with BL Companies and Wes Williams with Whataburger.
Okay. If you guys would state your name, relation to the case, and
Yeah.
address, and I'll swear you both in.
Wes Williams, project manager for Whataburger. I live in Clayton, North Carolina.
Lee Bakley, the civil engineer, live in Charlotte, North Carolina, 3420 Torrington Way, Charlotte.
Just for consistency, if you could provide your address.
Correct. 377 DeMilt Drive, Clayton, North Carolina. I
Thank
work
you.
from my home.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Hearing the affirmative for both, please proceed.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. These two design alternates from Whataburger are made in connection with a new restaurant that they have planned at 6305 Falls of Neuse Road. Sorry. Okay. The first request, as mentioned by Mr. McDonald, is relief to the parking limited requirements. We would be providing 30% of our lot frontage within the build-to range with the building facade rather than 50% required by the parking limited build-to requirements. Second request relates to transparency. We're providing 12% transparency between 0 feet and 12 feet rather than the required 33%. And we're providing 28% transparency between 3 feet and 8 feet rather than the required 50. 6305 Falls of Noose Road is about 0.84 acres on the west side of Falls of Noose Road. We have approximately 264 feet of frontage along Falls of Noose. We are northwest of the Falls of Noose Road and Spring Forest Road intersection. This site was formerly a PDQ. Just to also orient you to the site, Winston's Restaurant is immediately north, and obviously the Fresh Market Shopping Center is immediately to our west. Our site and the shopping center both zoned commercial mixed use, 3 stories, parking limited. And the parking limited frontage requires that 50% of our lot be occupied by building facade within the build-to range of 0 and 100 feet. So that would require just under 132 feet of building facade to meet the build-to requirements. Whataburger is planning to demolish this existing building and construct their own new restaurant. I'll note that the existing building does not meet the 50% build-to requirement either. Here's a view of the former PDQ restaurant. This is from Falls of Noose Road. Please note the landscape retaining wall separating the sidewalk from the building. We plan to keep as much of that landscaped area as we possibly can, so obviously keeping that retaining wall and many of the plantings within that area. Also note that there is an existing ramp that leads from the sidewalk along Falls of Noose. It goes up and then up towards our site. That will be retained as well. And then another view from Falls of Noose Road, and you can see the balance of the landscaping and another view of that ramp leading to the site. Now I'll have Mr. Bakley come up and walk through the site plan.
As was indicated previously, we are proposing to demolish the existing PDQ restaurant and put a slightly smaller building for Whataburger, approximately 2,816 square feet. The building will be shifted more toward the center of the parcel. We will be removing one of the existing access points into the shopping center access drive, so hopefully that will help with increasing safety in the shopping center. The build-to requirement, as has been mentioned, is to have 50% of the street frontage encompassed with your building facade. Unfortunately, with the proposed Whataburger building, we do not have 132 feet of building frontage. Our building is approximately 79 feet, 8 inches, so just a hair under 80 feet long. So to get us to the nearly 132 feet for the design alternate requirement, we are proposing a screen wall that would be 7 feet long on the back corner of the building just to the south, and additionally a dense evergreen landscape planting row that would be approximately 46 feet in length. So the total there would get us to just over approximately 132 feet, 8 inches, so just beyond that 50% requirement per the build-to zone. This is a little bit zoomed in view showing the 7 foot wide, 8 foot tall screen wall there at the southeast corner of the building. And then the blue circles there are the proposed plantings. This slide shows the colored rendering of what the proposed landscape plan and site will look like. We will be maintaining the existing sidewalk connection on Falls of the Noose. Going up that ramp that you saw on the previous slide, we will be extending that concrete walk with a crosswalk to the main entrance of the proposed Whataburger. Our plan is to maintain those existing trees along the street frontage there of Falls of the Noose. We will supplement the landscaping in that area with additional evergreen shrubs that you can see those right along and just to the south of the sidewalk connection there. This plan shows the proposed evergreen shrubs and the 8-foot screen wall there on the plan left of the rear of the building. Again, the 80-foot building, almost 80-foot building, 7-foot long screen wall, and then 46 feet of dense evergreen plantings. What we are proposing there for the plantings are emerald green arborvitae plants, along with the shrubs that you see there on the street side. Those will be a row of inkberry hollies, and they are staggered again between the right-of-way and the drive-through lane to provide some added visual landscape depth to the view. Oh, stay here. So this will be, again, the building elevation from Falls of the Noose. When accounted for, the building facade, again, with this 46 feet of evergreen shrubs and 7-foot wide screen wall, would get us beyond the required 50% build-to.
And now I'll go back to the standards for approval and run through those relating to build-to. So the first standard, the approved design alternate, is consistent with the build-to regulations. The intent of these regulations is to strengthen the street edge and establish a sense of enclosure. First, I'll note the proposed building itself is well within the parking limited build-to range. The city allows for up to 100 feet of space from the right-of-way. We are well within that 100 feet distance. This spacing allows us to create that easy pedestrian access from Falls of Noose sidewalk, up the ramp, into our site, across the crosswalk, and into the Whataburger. So not only being within the build-to, but being well within the build-to, I think, provides an additional sense of enclosure and provides a sense of place for pedestrians and vehicles alike. Where we are unable to fulfill the build-to regulations through traditional building facade, we are incorporating that screen wall as well as the opaque landscaping for the length of our deficiency. So again, when you add up building facade and the evergreen landscaping, that would be just over 50% of our lot's frontage. For these reasons, we think that the design alternate is consistent with the intent to strengthen the street edge and establish a sense of enclosure. I'll note too, talking about establishing an edge, I think that existing landscaping does a pretty good job of kind of making that break from right-of-way to private property. And again, that is remaining as is and is being enhanced by this project. Second standard of approval, the approved design alternate does not substantially negatively alter the character defining street wall or establish a build-to pattern that is not harmonious with the existing built context. This is a very auto-oriented area of Raleigh. Many of the lots around this site and near this intersection all have ample parking spaces with internal vehicular circulation that gets you completely around the building. So I would not describe this as a, edge of downtown, buildings line the street, everybody's walking, everybody's biking. There is still, I would say this is a very car-dominated part of the city. But to that end, we do have the pedestrian connection to the street, and we are providing that crosswalk from the edge of the ramp to our building. So I think there is some positives to be had from that design element. Number three, The change in percentage of building that occupies the build-to area or increased setback does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety. Again, we are capitalizing on that existing ramp that gets people from the right-of-way to this site, making sure that people have a safe crossing from that ramp by including that striping to alert motorists that people may be crossing there in order to get from the building to the road or vice versa. And so because of that, we think that this request absolutely does not negatively impact pedestrian access, comfort, or safety. I'm going to turn it back over to Lee, and we will cover the transparency request.
So yeah, the second part of our design alternate request obviously has to deal with the building transparency. Per the slide that you see here, well, let me speak to what the UDO requirements are. So the UDO requires that we have at least 33% of the building facade as a transparent glass between 0 feet and 12 feet, that first main floor. That would be a total for this building of 315 square feet of transparency. So while we acknowledge that we do not meet that as far as the definition of true transparency goes, the windows there in blue are in fact transparent, but the windows behind the menu board that are more white or shaded in gray, those are being proposed as spandrel glass. But the total area that we are showing here is 393 square feet, so we are exceeding the required 33%, 393 square feet. That gets us to 41% of the building facade as having a form of glazing from 0 feet to 12 feet. An additional transparency calculation is the 3 foot to 8 foot zone, where in that realm or that range, we should be somewhere per the UDO requirements, we should have 158 square foot of transparency. What we are showing here, transparency and spandrel, is well above that. We're showing 265 square foot in that blue zone of true transparency windows and spandrel glass windows. The reason that we cannot adhere to the full definition of the transparency for this building facade is just the nature of the building being a fast food restaurant. We do have a dining room and a drive-through window, and so that transparency and standard windows can apply with no problems. However, at the back of the restaurant, as is the case with most fast food restaurants, we have our kitchen area and walk-in coolers, which is located here on this sheet on the north side of the page. We have significant oven hoods, cooking equipment, walk-in coolers, and various other electrical equipment and outlets, et cetera, all along that northern wall just behind the spandrel glass component. So Whataburger, for operation's sake, needs to have that wall just to the east of the pickup window. That wall needs to be fully sheetrocked so that we can affix all of the various kitchen equipment, hoods, electrical outlets, and there on the northeast corner of the page, the walk-in coolers as well. So the spandrel glass is the option that would allow us to meet the transparency / glazing requirements for at least for the 33% requirement.
Thank you, Lee, and now I'll cover the transparency standards of approval. Great. So first, the approved design alternate is consistent with the intent of the transparency requirements. The intent of those regulations is to lend visual interest to street-facing building facades, not only for pedestrians, but for motorists as well, and for building occupants. I think that this development certainly does that. I know that this is not the building that is proposed, but I have to think if just by retaining this retaining wall in this landscaped area, there is a level of visual interest that draws pedestrians, it draws motorist eyes over to the site. It's not the same standard kind of streetscape that you see all throughout Raleigh. And so I think by retaining that, we do a lot to maintain the level of visual interest that somebody would have when crossing this site, not even accounting for the landscaping that's provided or the fenestration that's provided. Although I will say, as to the visual interest itself, again, this does not show that landscaped retaining wall area, but when looking here, we've got plenty of fenestration. It just so happens that it doesn't meet the city's definition for transparent glazing. It's less than 80% transparent. But when you look at this building, you have 46 feet of evergreen landscaping. You've got in front of that a row of evergreen shrubs. You've got pretty much wall-to-wall fenestration along the entirety of this building. And then couple that or add on to that the existing retaining wall and landscaped area. I think that there is plenty of visual interest that Whataburger is both maintaining and creating here on its plan. The second standard of approval, and I apologize that these slides are so far apart. The street-facing building facade utilizes other architectural, artistic, or landscape treatments to create visual interest to offset the reduction in transparency. And you just saw that in that building elevation. Wall-to-wall fenestration, although some of those windows don't meet the transparency definition, they do break up blank wall area. You're not just looking at a wall of brick, and you've got 46 feet of evergreen plantings and the rest of the landscaping between the building and the right-of-way. So I think Whataburger's kind of hitting this mitigation component from multiple angles, both from a landscaping perspective and from an architectural perspective. That concludes our presentation. We are happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm seeing no members of the public here to speak. I'll have commission questions. Oh, Keegan, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a point of clarity and make a statement on the record that there was a typographical error in the staff report and notice that cited East Lenore Street as being the street that was relevant for transparency, and obviously there's no frontage along East Lenore Street, so just want to state for the record that it was Falls of Noose.
Thank you for that clarification. Very different streets. Question for the applicant, and maybe this is more for you, Worth, of, did you review previous, I mean, we've seen a number of cases like this of the more quick service designed, driveway fronting onto the street, and even recently, in terms of how we've, previously reviewed and what we've looked at in terms of considerations there.
Well, I can, and I guess this is related to the build to request or
Transparency, related to transparency.
transparency.
We commonly see spandrel grass proposed in a similar type of interior configuration here. And I think this commission has pushed back at times on parts of that, but I guess my question there, to actually ask a question is, along that frontage, which is the spandrel proposed glass, was the upper story windows looked at all in terms of ability to accommodate any amount of transparency?
We examined that, and I think there are, we found some examples around the city where there are there is that spandrel glass kind of below a certain point, and then you have transparency above. For this specific restaurant and this specific kitchen layout, we don't have the luxury of partially kind of clear glazing parts of those windows. As Mr. Bakley said, we've got oven hoods, we've got coolers, we've got heavy-duty kitchen equipment, we've got people counting money back there. So not only is it from a building safety perspective, there is a human safety perspective in this as well, to not have a clear line of sight into that particular part of the building.
That's fair. No, we, the walk-in cooler, no doubt, don't need to see into that. I think we've seen folks propose designs that are able to accommodate, higher up windows or even a break where there is a window, so that way there's that transparency for the staff that are working.
So I can expand on that. So can I just touch? Okay.
Yeah.
So this,
Yep, there you go.
this, and this are all blocked by fryer, hoods, and/or cooler.
Sure.
So this one right here is the only one that could have a clear story upper, but it would require us to separate the two windows, the upper section and the bottom, to make the top one clear story and then the bottom one spandrel. So then you would mess up the entire continuity of what we're doing.
Okay. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the commission?
I had maybe just a couple of questions / comments about your plant specification. And I know it's beyond the jurisdiction of this commission, but since you're offering them as in lieu of build-to requirements, there is a lot of disease issues with boxwoods in terms of like boxwood blights, and inkberry holly tends to become really scraggly over time. So in terms of if you're trying to create an evergreen buffer, you might want to consider different plants, something like our Ilex vomitoria, like a dwarf European holly that is dense, doesn't require trimming, pretty pest resistant, or even a hardy viburnum, a dwarf version, like things that will, I guess, perform well for you if you're trying to use that as your built-to satisfaction.
We would take any recommendations from the commission on planning.
Any other questions from the commission for the applicant? I will say, thank you for including the interior design. I was going to say, before you got to it in the presentation, that's typically something that we've asked for in situations like this. And in the future, if you can make sure that that gets included in the pre-submitted materials too, that would be very helpful going forward. Dave, you got a question?
Did you explore anything with the drive-through canopy, increasing its size to fulfill some of that build too? I guess we're talking about transparency, sorry. Are we talking about both things? Okay. Yeah, and I'm thinking of what we recently approved, which was structural. Right? Wasn't that the last Whataburger we looked at?
Going with the tree.
Going with the tree?
Yeah,
Okay.
They had the site wall around the seating area, and we had the shade
Gotcha.
tree.
That one was,
A drive-through canopy is kind of cost prohibitive. I know other QSRs do it, but in our opinion, it doesn't provide what we're trying to meet in the UDO in a horizontal appearance from the street. You just see a vertical canopy, so we just didn't, we didn't think about it because we didn't feel like it met what we were trying to achieve here.
Maybe a bigger question on transparency. The other side of the building, from what we're looking at, is much more transparent. I'm assuming there's some obvious reason that the drive-through can't be on the parking lot side, and the transparent side of the building faces the street.
So we can't put parking between the street and the building, right? 2 bays of parking. So our building is not, it can't be reversed. The flow of the building, the drive-through and traffic coming in and out of the site, it can't be reversed. With our driveways both being internal, it would have probably, I mean, I would have to redesign the whole site to see if that's even feasible. Maybe Lee can speak to it. But, and then we really don't want to put parking between the building and the road. In this particular situation, I don't think that's something that you guys want either.
I mean, if you just flipped it over, it would still not meet the requirement, you know, yeah.
And maybe this may. Current slide. So again, just to demonstrate, we don't have any access directly via Falls of Neuse, and so all of our driveways or our trips are coming from that internal shopping center drive. So I think if you flip the building and now have people, you know, looping around here while also navigating, getting in and getting out, I think it leads to a really complicated and potentially unsafe outcome there.
Okay. Seeing no further questions from the commission, we'll now close the hearing to deliberate. If someone would please flip us back to our findings. We'll start with build 2. Wait. Thank you. Okay, thoughts from the commission? Largely speaking, given the context and the road we're talking about, I find this to be fairly reasonable. Any other thoughts from the commission? Dave?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'd like to see a little more variation in that screen. I think they got 11 or something like that. If they could use 2 species in there to mix it up a little bit. So just have that solid green hedge, give it a little variability.
Yeah, Claire, before you said something, I was going to ask if they have the right plantings in there.
Yeah, because I think it is actually pretty thoughtful given what they have to work with, but I think that the thing that they're putting in to satisfy the build to is kind of counter to the transparency requirement, because then you have this wall of green, which is very much not transparent. So I think just having like a variety of plants, I think, could be just the right answer here. Just 2 species, to your point.
Yeah, I think too. I want to avoid them going back and then giving us 15 different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Use 2.
Yeah, I mean, other than having the right species to achieve the desired outcome, I think what they've proposed is
satisfactory.
Is fine for me. In some cases, as a commission, we've said more ability to just blend in and be uniform is better versus, you know, having something that it more takes the eye. But so I tend towards that in this case, but I'm very open-minded if folks have other thoughts. But the building's just not long enough to conform. I think that's the crux of it.
I actually think the way they have it, with just the fact that they have the arborvitae and something low, they have 2 levels, I think that satisfies that. I would be fine personally approving it the way it is.
Okay. Any other thoughts on build 2? Seems we're in agreement. Reasonable there. All right, can someone flip to findings for transparency? Thank you.
Sorry. No, you're good. I appreciate the help.
I wish they would let us be able to control it, but maybe in the new city hall.
Only 2025. Wait till 2028.
Yeah, just a clicker. Okay, thoughts on transparency here? Obviously this is a type of request that we see very frequently for this type of use. And it's always the same answer of just that's the configuration from the prototypical design, and therefore it can't meet it. And sometimes spandrel glass is proposed. As a commission, sometimes we've pushed back on that and asked for upper clear story where it's possible. Other times we've, not messed with it from a degree to which it messes with the overall visual character of the space. But, if you take the spandrel grass as transparency, which is not, but that's the intent of it, then they do meet both levels of percentage that's required. Now, obviously, if all of it were spandrel glass, that wouldn't exactly do it, but,
Will the spandrel glass have, I guess, can we reopen it? That's a good question for the client. Does the spandrel glass, is that backlit in the evenings? Or is it dark?
I'm happy to reopen that
Yeah,
if that's
that's
so we'll reopen the hearing if you heard the question.
It is not, but it can be varying colors. It can be black or it can be a lighter color if we don't want black spandrel.
Is there
Okay.
a possibility to get it to match the visual appearance of the clear glazing?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's impossible to do that, but I find it, when it's as similar as possible to the clear glazing, it blends in the best.
I think that also kind of
I
does a good
don't
job
have
of
my
trying to meet
architect
the
here, and I would have to ask my architect how to make that happen. I mean, how to try to achieve that. So it would be, I mean, you could make it a condition to try to achieve as close, but that's the best answer I can give.
I don't think that we're enough experts in
Not either.
spandrel glass opacity, or whatever the right word would be for that type of light transfusion.
So my thinking is it'll look fine all day long when the sun's out, and then at night, I just don't want it to go completely dark and you just have one lit window on the end and the rest of it a dark building. Is there something to do that keeps the variability?
There are wall packs on that side of the building that will be providing downlight, if that helps with your decision.
Okay. Probably, yeah.
it's going to be darker.
Yeah.
Even if they do their best to match the daylight appearance.
Okay. Do we feel like this is reasonable? Any other elements here that should be considered in terms of creating, additional treatments that help to offset this, that should be part of this proposal? I think it's gonna be pretty hard to see. So I think this, again, is reasonable and consistent with what the commission has provided in the past. There's definitely a tipping point where if all of this was spandrel glass, no, that doesn't do it. But I do like, generally speaking, the, architectural design for the building is not homogeneous, but congruent. Okay. Seeing no other thoughts, would someone like to make a motion?
Do we need to close the hearing?
Oh, yeah, sorry. We're closing the hearing to deliberate, which we're already doing. All right, now I will entertain a motion. Or other thoughts? Dave,
Motion
go ahead.
to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
With the condition that 2 species be used in the screen plants.
I think we're going to want to be more specific than that, but
How more specific?
where you're referring to,
Oh, yeah.
Because technically they have right now 2 species, just a tall one and a little one.
how strongly do you feel that we need to make this condition?
83%?
I also would suggest too, if you're contemplating a condition, to go ahead and see what the applicant would be willing to agree to as well.
I think they said they'd take recommendations. Are you asking, is our recommendations good enough and we trust that they'll do it?
I can speak to that. We acknowledge that local staff has a lot more insight as to the variety of species that perform better in the Raleigh area, Piedmont area versus other areas. So we'd be more than happy to work with the Urban Forestry Department on the preferred species of the shrubs, in addition to a second species of the taller screens that are being proposed, other than the emerald green arborvitaes. There's spruces, firs, that sort of thing, that we could add a second species to that screen wall, no problem.
Okay, so opened the hearing again. Thank you. Claire, the latter part of what he said in terms of adding a second species of the taller,
What is your question?
is that,
Does that sound?
will that achieve what we're hoping to achieve here, and is that a reasonable thing?
I think so. I think. Would your 83% be satisfied? Yeah. Okay.
You know, as a general note, I try not to prefer not to do conditions because they just complicate things.
Yeah.
But if you feel strongly that
Yeah.
materially adds to this, then. so
I
be
would
it.
I would be fine with no conditions, given that they heard the feedback on the species, but if you feel strongly with it.
I mean, I agree with you. They're probably not going to do it if it's not a condition, but we also have to have a condition that's able to be objectively reviewed.
He's
Oh,
good. We're good.
he's going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Motion to approve?
Without any conditions,
No conditions.
both the Bill 2 and the transparency.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second on that
I'll
motion to
second it.
approve? There's a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion carries. Hearing, the commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with right to such notice following adoption of the decision. Thank you. All right, that concludes our QJ portion. Casey, I believe we have a couple of items. Oh, we have to do minutes. I've had a chance to review the minutes from, this is the first meeting of February 6th. Thank you. And they looked fine to me, but anyone else had a chance to review any corrections, questions? Seeing none.
Not ready.
Someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
So that's moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. That carries as well. Okay, now Casey, to the rest of the agenda.
I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to draw y'all's attention to is that March 20th is the annual retreat, and we'll have to get the annual report more or less finalized by that evening, so that y'all can vote on it. I think I've talked to Will, he's worked on some things. Stravia has helped with some editing and updates. So if there are others that are willing and able to get that sort of final draft prepared before the March 20th meeting, please let us know.
To say that a different way, we do our annual report to council at the April 6th council meeting.
April 8th, yeah.
April 8th. And then, so we need to finalize our annual report, which is a document we publish every year, and it's adopted by council. There's a couple main sections to it. Kyle, I think you said last time you'd be happy to help with the trends portion.
I'll speak to Casey after this.
Wonderful. And so Stravia is working on a portion. Matt, you said you can help with editing, so over the next 2 weeks, we got to get it to 95%, and then we can talk more as a commission at the retreat. But back on the retreat portion, that's 2 weeks from today at our normal time, and the location is,
The Crowder Woodland Center over by Lake Johnson.
okay, and you're going to send more email communication about that, just
Yep.
since
Yeah,
it's-
I updated the meeting appointment to have the location, I believe, but I'll send a reminder email too.
Okay, I'll do my best to that end as well. Typical retreat, for those that haven't done retreat before, what would you say? We probably take max 3 hours?
Yeah, we have the room reserved from 4:30 to 7, and so we need to wrap up by 7 because we have to be out of the room by 7:30.
Okay. So we typically review our cases from the past year, look for trends, talk about report, talk about, broadly speaking, where the commission's headed, what, if there are specific initiatives or things that we would like to do with our work plan over the next year, that type of conversation. Sometimes we have a guest speaker. Actually, we typically do have a guest speaker, but we don't have one this time, do we? No. Okay.
You have dinner?
We have dinner. Neomond, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
unless the commission wants to do something different.
Nope, we're sticking with Neomond. Okay. And then Sir Walter Raleigh Awards, no update there?
No specific update. We're still moving based on past feedback with Raleigh Union Station and the last Wednesday in September like we did this past year. So if there are any strong opinions to not do either of those things, speak now or speak now.
When will we send out the call for both sponsors and submissions?
So sponsors will be more towards the summertime. I mean, I suppose there's nothing necessarily stopping you from doing it sooner, but typically we do it closer. And then the call for artists and call for nominations will actually be coming up fairly soon, in the next April, May,
Okay, so April,
pretty soon.
we'll need to, April, we have to finalize the like award categories and that type of stuff, and
And
then,
we could talk about that at the annual retreat as well,
Great.
if you want to make some tweaks to the category, or the categories.
okay. And then we'll pick an artist or we'll request submissions for artists in April, May-ish as well, or May. Last year it was earlier than previously.
Yeah, I think it would be May-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to look at the calendar, but in that ballpark.
So we talked a little bit about using that artist work in more of the marketing materials besides just a certificate. And if you wait until then, you're probably too late to be able to do something like that. And so I don't know if people want to consider using the same certificate, the same artist, or whether we didn't get a buyout for that, I don't know. Whether we wanted to use the same work from last year and just repeat it for a while to see and put it in the marketing, but I mean, just
That's a great question.
it's odd to just have a certificate that nobody sees, and we pay for it every year, and we don't really get there's no awareness around it, so.
That's a great question. Could we either reutilize last year's artwork this year and requesting that stuff to get some extra life out of it, or, yeah, is there a way to pull any of that forward to get some more airtime? Good questions for the retreat. Anything else on Sir Walter Awards? Nope.
I don't think so.
And then lastly, I think Legacy Projects is the final item, which is, I believe we have approximately $12,000 this year to be able to award in Legacy Projects, for which we have to encumber that by June. So really, that realistically means we got to encumber it by May, and that will go pretty fast. So we need to move pretty quickly. So I'd love to spend some time talking at retreat about either ideas for projects or process around ways that we could solicit proposals there, because that timeline always moves really fast, and we're under the gun at the end of the fiscal year. I'll send this out via email informationally for the group, but Charlotte does I believe it's called a placemaking grant out of their Urban Design Center, which is a cool kind of peer example of a very similar end outcome. It's a little bit higher total funding pool, but it's about the same amount of money. It's, I think, in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $25,000 kind of, I would almost call that micro grant for placemaking. So I'll send that out as something just to think about for us if we were wanting to make this a more standardized process or cast a wider net. But part of our problem is we don't know the exact amount of funding every year, but we've been able to achieve 10,000 at least most every year that I've been on the commission. So
Is Charlotte's continuously open, rolling thing, or jury committee?
I'll send the link out. My recollection is it's not continuous, but there's some gates of award. But
I brought this up last time we talked about it and can't remember the reason why it was a bad idea. Why wouldn't we ever advertise it like we did the Sir Walter Raleigh Award?
I think it's a question for staff much communications bandwidth, correct?
I mean, there is,
Facade grants and all kinds of other things that the city does to help people fund projects.
I think it partly depends on to what extent you want to have some control over the types of projects that you fund, right? Like when you open it up more broadly, there could be more implications for how all projects have to be evaluated and, against the same criteria and everything, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? It's just different than how the commission has approached it in the past.
When you do something like that and open it up, do we have to form juries separate from the commission, or can the commission just take a meeting?
No, I think the commission can be it, but
Review
you
them and
do
say it.
definitely have to create more structure around process. And then
Yeah.
to the question on, sending it out, I think it's a very reasonable thing to ask, but we should come with a more articulated proposal on how that works, because that would be the next question for the communication staff is, okay, where do people go? Do they submit through a website? What's the, mechanics of that, and how much of a burden is that on communications bandwidth versus other things, so. But if we feel good about that, it's not a bad thing for the end result of the legacy project, but.
It's always either been initiatives that someone on the commission knows about, or that someone has thought of who knows someone on the commission and approaches them, basically.
There's an element of that. Sometimes staff also brings forward some things. So we've worked with Urban Projects Group a couple of times.
Like Commerce Street last year.
That's right, or the Midtown Waterfront. So, yeah, it would be great to have more arm's length from not someone that we just know.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any other thoughts on that? So we will definitely talk more at the retreat about that, but any other open or new business here? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.